Welcome to the Harmony in a Hurry podcast. We are Caroline and Anna, mindfulness enthusiasts, exploring ways to weave a little bit of mindfulness into our busy routine. Today we are chatting to Rina, who is the founder of Calm Curator, a movement medicine facilitator inspired by her Mauritian heritage and marketing specialist for impact-driven organizations. Having built a successful career in advertising, she found herself in an unhealthy cycle of 15-hour workdays, excessive drinking, and questioning her life. At her lowest, she was introduced to the incredible healing practices of dance, yoga, and meditation, which helped her find true balance between all parts of who she is. We hope you enjoy.
So thank you for having me. I am Rina. I like to consider myself a balance between the things I do for meditation and my corporate life. It's like the creative side and my corporate life. That's really everything that I am. I like to make sure that there is a balance. So on my creative side, it's all about mindfulness and movement as meditation. And that really enables me to be the best person I can be in my corporate life. And the corporate life makes me really appreciate the mindfulness, and it sort of goes in this beautiful circle. So yeah, that's me. Thank you again for having me.
We're so excited to have you here today. So thank you so much. And so in saying that with mindfulness, it's really like a bridge and a balance. Would you be able to explain a bit more about what mindfulness does mean for you?
For me, it really is connected with time. So it's mindfulness for me is how do I be present in that moment in time? How can I expand that moment in time where a minute might seem really quick? When I am mindful, it feels like a lifetime, another time. And it's again making the most of my time. So I read somewhere that our lives, if we live up to 80, is 4,000 weeks. And that doesn't seem a lot. It really, that scared me. I hope it's true. I had to check that out, but it scared me. So how can I make the most of that time? So for me, there is a beautiful synergy between mindfulness and making that most, expanding and being present in time.
And how did your journey into mindfulness begin?
Similar to what I believe you've probably been through around a real pivotal point where I had to change. I don't like using the word breakdown. I like to use the word breakthrough. But I sort of grew up knowing that I have to do really well because my parents gave up a lot for me. So I did really well at school, got myself into an advertising role, really focused in marketing. And my worth, my value was how many hours I can work in the office, what people saw of me. Like I would honestly go out really, really late because I wanted to be known and people know me for that. And then come in and work in the next day at 8 a.m. And I just did that over and over and over again. And I also at the same time was looking for a relationship and there was no time for it. So I would squeeze in dates at these really small moments and it just was off balance. And because there wasn't any mindfulness in any part of what I was doing, I made some really terrible decisions, that led me to, I have to say, sort of drugs, alcohol, terrible abusive relationships. But I also played a part in it. I wasn't aware of what I was doing and creating. And it took this one relationship to really shift. I had to break absolutely everything down. I was a shell of a human. And I went back to my mum and she looked after me and hugged me. And I found dance as a way for me to start to find light above what I was, this cloud that I felt I was in. I had to dance. I've always loved dancing, but again, it was related to alcohol, after work drinks, all of that. And I found a new perspective on dance. And that was ecstatic dance. And that was my first tiptoe into mindfulness. And there's so much more to say, but that is how I genuinely started. It was a turning point, a breakthrough, I would say.
And I was listening to one of your Instagram posts where you were talking about how in Mauritius dance has been used as a way of healing trauma. Can you
Completely
a bit more about that?
Yeah, definitely. So Mauritius is a really, really small island. Like if you're on Google Maps, you have to sort of zoom and zoom more and zoom even more. So small, but it's got such a beautiful history. One where there is a lot of pain, but there is a lot of like togetherness that has come from it. So It's an island that no one lived on it. And in the 17th century, they first brought the first slaves there because there was ebony on the island. So they were cutting down trees, and it was colonized by many people, but slaves were brought from Africa. And then later on, when slavery was abolished, they introduced something called an indentured labor, which is pretty much the same. It's free labor, exactly the same, but they brought people from India, and then tradespeople from China came as well. And what consistently was present throughout that time was this idea of dancing together. And that originated from the practices in East Africa. And what they would do is they would go to the beach and dance around a fire. And that's where the idea of Sega music came. And they have very specific instruments that came with that as well. And there's a very specific movement with Sega movement. It's very much in the hips, which I love, a little hip movement, but it's also in the feet. So it's almost like a two-step. And people say that two-step is like because people were shackled, and it was, the representation of that. So even though those times were hard, dance seemed to be a way to overcome and to release pain. And that was passed on generation to generation. And I really feel that is strong within me and how I resonate with dance. That's the sort of connection that I really love to talk about today. Not from always about the history, but it's the fact that they got themselves into flow state. And again, they used this thing that belonged to them to overcome and to move forward.
That's a very powerful, I don't feel like mechanism is the right word or tool, but it was a very powerful place to come to use the movement of the body and that freedom of movement to release so much mental and emotional and physical pain.
And also that you've got the elements in nature. So being outdoors, often on the beach. So hearing the water, being grounded on, the sand, the heat of the fire, dancing around a fire, it feels really all encompassing. They used to say there's a word, and everyone in my family and most Mauritians would say it as a negative word. And you would say Babani and Mortuloli, like the spirit has come on that person. The spirit is on him or the spirit is on her. And for me, that isn't something scary. It's the flow state. You are releasing, these people probably cried and laughed and just shaked it all off. And that for me is so powerful.
Wow. It almost gives me like the shivers, the layers of the rich history, and for your family, like going back, and how that resonates with you is so beautiful.
And really how do you incorporate it in your practices?
So I guess mostly it's in the hips, because I like to dance a lot with my hips, and it's just about the fun that comes with it. And with Sega music as well, they used to tell stories. And I feel like every dance that I do is a story, like how I'm feeling in that moment. If I had a really stressful day, I literally just go outside and play around, and it's telling that story again. So it's a bit more of a loose connection. But in another sense, I do want to bring the whole story to people and share that through a new practice or a new sort of flow of dance called the Babani flow. So that's what I want to share.
So how would you then encourage or help people get started and to connect with the flow of dance to help bring that in, especially if they're either embarrassed? Well, I'm going me, because even though I love dancing, I don't dance in front of anyone anymore. I'm like, no way. But if people are really self-conscious, have you got things to help them,
Yeah, I like to go back to being a child. So really small actions in your day to day, because I think just before I sort of go into the actual answer, when I went to ecstatic dance, it was a huge deal for me. I was this corporate, always wore high heels girl, and there's nothing wrong with that, but going out in a field with random people and then everyone rolling around was wild to me. It was wild. Yeah. So I see that there is sometimes a big gap of you also go there and you might have a little bit of jealousy. Why can they do it? Why can't I do it? So the question you asked is so important, because it is about bringing it into your day to day. So for example, 3 examples I'll give. I've got a standing desk, and when I'm working, because that does still take up a lot of my life, I'll have music on, and it is literally just about, you might not even notice, but just moving around here potentially.
Yeah.
If you've got children in your family and, they play around and sometimes they like bump up and down, dance with them, learn from those little children that you know in your circles, if anything. And then seeing the beauty in little areas of the house. For example, I see lots of shadows. And when we were kids, we would make funny shapes with these shadows. And, and for me, it's like, I wonder what you did if you dance with that shadow.
Yeah.
Because it's not about, for me, it takes the pressure off of you and it's you looking at a shadow, which in itself is quite beautiful. So how can you dance with the shadow, for example? And you can do these as you're like grabbing a cup of tea and you might spot a shadow and it's like, oh, I'm going to see like, what that looks like. Or if there's a child, I'm going to dance with that kid, like, really silly. Doesn't matter what I look like because it's about the child and what I'm giving to that child. So yeah, those are 3 small examples.
So I'm guessing with the dancing, one of the benefits might be to also release stress from the day and frustration. So it might be like a good transition from finishing work to starting your relaxing to actually go through something like that will kind of ground you and release.
Completely. So we've got these neurotransmitters, and I feel like it takes you through to movement overall, and dance takes you through a whole journey. So we've got the endorphins, so stress release. So after a day of work, as you mentioned, stress may be up, and with sort of the endorphins release, it's almost just like, okay, bringing that down. But then we've also got the dopamine that's left when sort of the stress comes down. So there's this idea of like gratefulness that comes with that as well. And for me, when I was dancing, I was a really stressful part of my life. So that pain release and that, natural painkiller was so helpful from endorphins. And it did leave me with motivation. So dopamine was left chemically in my brain. And that dopamine almost while I was dancing gave me this idea of, I have to change this. I must make a change. So as I was dancing freely, I knew that later on, I had to make a change. It just really came together in terms of motivation. And then when you are dancing in a community, for example, you have that idea of togetherness and love and oxytocin as the neurotransmitter that's released, that love. And sometimes you're hugging yourself or hugging other people, not for everyone, but even just hugging yourself. And then once dance is finished, you're left with serotonin. And that just for me is the gratitude and this mood stabilizer after that you've danced. So it almost has like a long-term effect. So for me, dance is not just, all about being free and like I have no cares in the world, but in your brain and in your body, it's actually doing something.
Excellent.
Because as I mentioned, when I first went to ecstatic dance, I remember I was a bit like, oh, I don't know how to move. And I remember I had my eyes closed and I opened up my eyes and like people were just rolling on the floor. And in my head, my corporate brain was like, what is happening here? Like, what? Who are these people and what is happening? And then I was the person doing that because it eventually, as I became more open, I was like, I don't care what people think about me. I've got all of this incredible neurotransmitter action happening in my brain that the benefits are so much broader than what I thought people thought of me. And that was a huge shift because before that, all I cared about was what people thought of me.
Yeah. Wow, you've had some very big shifts within this journey and the way that you've brought this element into your life.
Completely. Yeah. It's changed everything for me. It really has.
And I know that you also run events and help other people discover mindfulness.
Yeah. So again, this bridge is really, really important. So I have started a company called Calm Curator, and it almost like reverse engineers retreats. One thing I found when I was going to lots of retreats is it's great that I'm meeting new people and connecting with new people. But some of these powerful changes, I wanted to experience or share it with people I truly felt safe with. also found at retreats, often the language, this is a safe space, is used. And that really bothers me. Like it really does, only because I feel like creating that safe space can be done from that individual. So they need to decide, this is a safe space for me. You can always say, I want to create a safe space. But as an example, I remember going to a retreat and that language was used. And then I was followed by someone the entire time. So really, like, I have to be strong enough and build my confidence to hold my boundaries. So I feel like people are sometimes safest with the people they choose, their friends, their families, cousins, sisters. So how can I create a retreat that almost is bespoke to them so they truly can experience these powerful things in their safe space? So Calm Curator is bespoke retreats, like for birthdays and hen dos brought directly to people. Again, that is really around if you haven't tried something and you want to give it a go with your girlfriends or whoever it is, you might say, Rena, I want to try Reiki and a meditation circle and then dance. And I will access some practitioners that I know and curate that day for them. The reason I call it a bridge is because some people have never tried this and may be too scared to go to retreats or give it a go. So creating a bridge for them to try new things and then creating a bridge for the practitioners who might be smaller practitioners, not so well known and small businesses after all. How can I help them and put them in front of these people and give them the opportunities?
That sounds fantastic.
Is there anything that you would like to add? Anything that you feel would help people?
I guess the only thing I always say, and I just love to end or just remind people of this, is to choose strength. You might have heard me or seen me post about it in the past, but it takes strength to do a lot. And that is a choice. So if, for example, I want to sit in and watch TV, I know that's just going to sort of switch my brain off. I have to really overcome that and choose strength to be like, no, I'm going to get up and do something physical. And that idea of being strong and choosing strength, I feel like when it is hard and you don't want to choose strength, do it for your inner child and, look back at that little girl or boy who you were when you were younger and do it for them because this will help them. Do it because when you need to hold your boundaries today, choosing strength is what will help you do that. So choose strength for the person that you are today and choose strength for the older version of you because, we're all slowly aging and our bones are changing and, dare I say, deteriorating. Choose strength because that person's going to need you as well. So if you can move a little bit more or expand your time with mindfulness a little bit more to give that person an easier life.
That's beautiful. I feel like I've gotten so much from our conversation. I'm so grateful and thankful for you coming and chatting with us. It's been delightful.
And that's it for us for this episode. As always, the show notes will have all the details so that you can follow and connect with Rena. And we hope to see you next one. See you. Bye. Thank you for listening.